Welcome to Field Talk, a Monitor Farm Scotland podcast. Join our host, Wallace Curry, as he explores the stories from Monitor Farm networks on how farmers have adapted their businesses, with support from specialists and experts, to assess farm performance and explore opportunities. Monitor Farm Scotland is farmer-led, farmer-driven, encouraging discussion and solution-based thinking.
Welcome back, everyone, to Field Talk, the Monitor Farm Scotland programme. I've said it, I think, the last couple of episodes, but I'll just continue to say it, just so if you've only came across this episode and haven't heard the rest of the series, this is the second series of the podcast. We in the first series we sort of covered pretty much exclusively, but not completely, talking to the monitor farmers, those that are the 9 monitor farms across Scotland, and also we had a sort of lambing special, which was also really good. Probably outdated now, and you won't be watching it until next year again. But yeah, really good chat there. This second series is more looking at some of the projects and sort of technologies that are being brought into that programme across the board. Today we're going to be focusing on looking at cattle EID, also optimising tag retention. Obviously, a big thing that we all come across with tags is how to keep them in longer for various reasons. And our expert today, which I'm sure you'd be happy with me saying, is Matthew Blyth. Matthew, would you like to say hello?
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
No, dear, it's a pleasure. You're certainly the right person to cover this. And you've done a few podcasts before, is that right? Yeah.
I've done one or two. Yeah. So ran my Nuffield scholarship and bits and pieces. So yes, not just in this country and other ones when I've been travelling.
Yeah, well, I was kind of hoping you mentioned that because I was quite certain that was the case, but I couldn't remember. I am also I'm going to be presenting in Aberdeen this year, so it's I've done the weird and wonderful travel that is that. What did you focus on?
You've done the fun part. Now it's down to you've got to do your work.
That's it. I know. Yeah, for sure. I've got all the benefit I've got to give back now. But what was it? What was it you looked into?
I was looking at the cost benefit of using electronic identification.
And when was that, Matt?
2021. So I was the first Nuffield scholars in COVID. So ours got extended out a little bit because we couldn't travel. So I presented 2 years ago. So,
and was that Exeter?
No, that was Exeter. Sorry, Exeter.
Yeah, well, I apologise because I either didn't see it because it was obviously split that year, or I was just completely befuddled by the whole process because it was my first day. One of the two. But Matt, just what's really good with these things is before we get into the crux of it and the technicalities, just give us a wee bit about yourself. You farm at home yourself as well, and what you're.
No, I don't farm no more. So I left school. If we go back that far, trying to explain a bit of my background. I've got bad dyslexia. I left school with a reading age of a 7-year-old, so I left secondary school failing most of my GCSEs. I went on to agricultural college, started off in general agriculture. Always wanted to work in the sheep industry from being a 9-year-old. Did general agriculture a couple of years, then went up to Northumberland, up to a place called Kirkley Hall, and specialised in sheep. After leaving there, I went to a pedigree farm back in Lincolnshire, where I'm from, and that's where I got the bug for data, genetics, understanding the information, understanding what's going on. And with my dyslexia, numbers, writing things down was an issue. So I started using things called Scions that we know as Walkabout Pros these days, which scan tags. But before they were possible of doing that, they were like little laptops. They could flick over, put in your pocket, no bigger than your mobile phone. And I had Excel running on that. We had 150 pedigree Suffolks, 300 cattle sort of thing running around. All the data and information on them was stored in that. My boss at the time absolutely loved it. Information galore everywhere. They were very forward thinking, set me up for my career. Then I moved down south to earn more money. Started as an assistant shepherd, worked my way through to being a farm manager. And in 2019, I was made redundant when the farm was sold. And I was convinced to go out and become a precision livestock advisor by some very clever ladies who know a lot more about the sheep industry than I do. And now that's what I'm doing, because I was one of the first people to put EID in. So the farm I managed I started managing it in 2003 in West Sussex, and we put EID in place in 2004. So that's 6 years before it became mandatory in sheep. We had it in sheep and cattle.
I mean, as you say there, was it 2009, 2010 that it became mandatory? Is that right?
2010 it came mandatory, yeah.
It's,
Those we turned in.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, just I was God, what would I have been? 13. My whole life has been, it's just been the normality. It's just been what it was. But I'd be interested to hear when, as you were saying, you were one of the first. How receptive was the sector to it at that point? Was it a pretty hard push to get there? What was that sort of 9 year period like?
Yeah, I gotta say it was a hard push. Luckily, I worked for some businessmen, for a businessman, and they could see the advantage of it. To start with, it was a hard sell to them, and unfortunately, me being me, I'm not just going to start with a stick reader and a cheap wayhead. I started by putting some of the best technology in possible, but I was lucky because of the fact is we were able to test some of it. So I was getting EID panels because I was stood on show stands or went to shows and I could see the advantage in it. I was already using data in some way, not in any form. No, I look back now and I was measuring grass, 25 years ago, pre-lambing, this, that, and the other, and going, I'm not quite sure why I'm doing this, but I know there's a reason I'm doing this. And as I've gone through my career, I've understood more and more. And it's a bit like EID, put electronic tags in, recording weight gain, understanding the performance of the animals, I knew was right. And it took me a long while to understand how to use that data, how to collect it. I've got a wayhead behind me, you can see, which was one of my first wayheads I had. We only scratched the surface on that for 5 or 6 years before we actually understood how to use it properly, what data was right to collect. But once we started collecting it, and some of the local farmers still around me go, what you were doing was really good. I can't see it working on my place, but what you were doing and how you used it was absolutely brilliant. But they're not being trained, shown how to use the data. And just because I got a thirst for knowledge, collecting data, I was willing to sit there in the evenings to do it because the computer programs weren't there in them days to be able to collect data like we got now. If we look back pre-2009, we probably had 4, 5 software platforms. Now we're running, well, I've got subscriptions with 13. So things have moved on so much. 2010 when it became legal, bit like it's got to do in cattle, when it comes in cattle, things will change again. As the industry, as we are compulsory have to use them, things will change. Software companies will change. The hardware will change, the software will change to keep up with us. We just need some mandatory regulations to push things being changed. But for the common farmer, for 80% of the industry, nothing really affected them, except for they worried we're going to put something in their ears, which is going to cost us £1, where we're used to spending 12p. Costs are massive on a farm. If you don't use that data, that's a big cost. But if you actually use it, it's a very cheap thing.
That for those listening, Matt, they won't see behind you, but maybe in the odd clip we have in social media, you'll be able to see some yellows, some light blues, some greens, some oranges, lots of different.
If I do that, that there's a few £1,000s worth sat there on my shelves.
We won't put your address out to everyone. But just on that, you're sort of your company you work for is your own under your name, Matt, and I assume you don't have allegiances to different companies, but
that's probably my worst thing I've ever done. I've got no allegiances for any company. I work with any software, any manufacturer, any this, that, and the other, because my view is what's right for one farm isn't right for the next farm.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. What is it you're looking for? And I'm going to say correct instead of best because it's going to, as you say, differ no matter what it is. What is it you're looking for from let's start with the tag before we get into even kit, the design of the tag itself. What is it you're after?
The design of the tag is a little bit down to what the farmers are happy with. Half of it's how they put it in. The biggest thing I've discovered with losses, now I used to run 1,000 to 1,500 ewes. At one point we had 100 head of dairy cattle that came in that we grew on and finished that were all EID being weighed. My losses of tags were below 1% on a year. Absolutely no problem at all. We had creep feeders on some fields, so that wasn't the issue. Its application of tags is the biggest thing. Most farmers don't understand that the manufacturers spend a fortune on working out how these tags stay in. They have to get a license for the tag. It's not like they can design something and just give it to you. They have to go through testing. Last time I heard, it's something like about 150,000 to get a new tag just through testing, let alone designing it, making molds, this, that, and the other. So it's not pennies, for them to design these new designs. They spend a fortune doing it, and they work out how they best hold them, how they best stay in. So every manufacturer, if it doesn't come in the box, most of them send them out in the box, but that might be just the tag manufacturers that I order tags from for clients that get something in the box, but there should be something in the box to show you how they recommend putting them in. There's been no end of work done in Australia, New Zealand, on their cattle websites for their government databases. It shows you how to put the tags in where they see the best retention. So whatever make it is, whatever you're happy with, look and talk to the manufacturers how they get the best out of them staying in. But when we look at EID, and this is going to be a bit interesting in Scotland because we're still not convinced which way Scotland's going to go with electronic identification in cattle, is if we look at low frequency, which we're all using now, especially in the sheep industry, there's two different types of technology in tags. There's what we call full duplex and what we call half duplex, FDX and HDX for simpleness. Now, full duplex works like a telephone conversation, or like we're doing now. We can speak both at the same time and talk over us if we really, really wanted to, but we're polite people. One shuts up, one speaks, and I'm going to do a lot of speaking today. So, that's what happens. HDX works the opposite way. So it works like a two-way radio, like a CB or something like that. You broadcast by pressing the button, then it listens. So all our readers in the UK can do both simultaneously. But HDX normally reads clear in a noisy environment. What I class as a noisy environment can be anywhere with motors. So dairies are the best example. Pumps, this, that, and the other. Old-fashioned strip lights. They have starter motors in them. Most of them are LED now, but you still find the old-fashioned strip lights on farms with the starter motors. That starter motor sends out a pulse to start the light up. That pulse can throw out EID readers. So if you've got a strip light above your cattle crush and you've got a panel reader and it's not reading, you say, oh, today it's not reading very well. Tomorrow you haven't got the light on. It seems to be working better today. Them tags might be better. No, it's probably interference from the noise that's in the environment. The best one I've ever seen is a welder, somebody welding, 100 yards away, but that welder sends out this magnetic field and it's interfering with the read of the reader. It can be quite a way away that the magnetic field's going to be set. I used to have fun years ago on show stands when people didn't understand the technology and how well it works. The old-fashioned Dremels, battery Dremels you have in your pocket, break the end off them so you've got nothing that spins round, but set the motor up. It used to take the EID readers out, so I could lean over with a handful of tags and not read. None of them would read. As soon as I walk away, it'd start working. You could have great fun because this magnetic field stops them. But HDX can read clearer through that. So if you're looking at cattle and we're on low frequency, HDX works a lot better than FDX because of the metal crush. Setting the EID reader up bits and pieces reads so much better. There's only a few manufacturers that use HDX because it costs more. It costs them more to put in place because it's a slightly more expensive technology. But also with HDX, it has a bigger aerial. So inside the tag, there's either think of a fuse, like a 13 amp fuse with a copper wire wrapped around it. They come in different lengths. The bigger it is, the better it reads. Slightly obvious, but if you look at the round tags that we get a lot in cattle, they have a bigger aerial in because they have a bigger surface in them. So that helps them read as well. So if I'm looking at tags, one, what's the farmer happy with? Can we get that in HDX or FDX? And what size is the chip inside it? So I know how big the aerial is. So if the manufacturer only does FDX, I will talk to the manufacturer and say, we want the biggest aerial you can do, 24 mil You know, against in the sheep industry, they range from anywhere down from 12 mil up to 24 mil, the aerials. So that's a big difference in size.
And I've got a feeling this is going to be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, Max. I'm sure there's other people listening. Maybe there's not. I'm sure there's other people that are thinking this. There is other people listening. I mean, thinking this. That sounds like no one's listening to this. Um, you've sort of explained the two examples of low frequency there. How does low frequency compare itself to high frequency?
So high frequency is still the technology of, in my personal opinion, still the technology of the future.
Right.
I don't think we're quite there with it. The high frequency is an absolutely fantastic technology. There's no doubt about it. The potential for it is absolutely brilliant. But in my gut feeling, we're not quite ready for it yet. We haven't got enough farmers using low frequency getting the benefit of that. We know all the readers you've got that read sheep tags, which are all low frequency, will not read high frequency. So we're going to need a different reader. The main manufacturers, the data filming this, haven't got EID readers that I can buy. So your Shearwell, your All Flex, your Agrident, your True Test, your Gallagher haven't got the readers. So we're buying something off the shelf at the moment. There is a Scott EID, so they've got some. But again, I've searched Scott EID. I can't find where I can buy one off the shelf. So I know it's not as easy as we think. I've got the tags. I've got the tags here. There's one here on my desk. I've got them here. They look exactly the same. They've just got a little microchip in the back of them. They're slightly lighter thing. We can read them further away. Now, I can't work out if that's an advantage or a disadvantage at this time. So we can read them in theory up to 9 meters away, which people say is great. Are we going to get the right animal? Are we going to pick up the animal behind? Are we going to pick the animal up in front? The other thing with high frequency reading market pens, we know it can read a whole batch of animals in seconds. So you can swipe the reader across and it'll read hundreds of animals in 1 second, in seconds, which again sounds brilliant. Coming off a lorry into a market, read hundreds of animals. But if these readers are not set up right, they're going to read the animals in the next door pen or 2 pens over. And that's the issue. I think the technology is sound, but we're going to need things setting up better. And I know through my Nuffield, through my experience over the last, God knows how many years, the EID readers we've got at the moment are never set up properly. So if we look at a panel reader on a cattle crush or even a sheep handler, a weigh crate, manufacturers just bolt them on. They don't think about tuning them. There's ways of tuning them to get better read, get better speed, get them clearer, because any metal or anything can send you a feedback. So understanding where the EID reader's got, because most cattle crushers, they're just bolted on. They're not built into them. To parry build them in, which is a great idea. So they tune them right for the cattle crush, but they're not tuned for the area. That's not happening with low frequency. Why is it going to happen on high frequency? Because Scotland will be the only country with it. We haven't got enough reps and that lot to go around the country setting low frequency up. Why are they going to start doing high frequency?
Is it a bit like, I don't know, I always look at the way we're moving towards car engines is like hydrogen's the place we want to be, but electric's a nice jump.
Yeah, and I think that's the best analogy I've heard. I honestly think high frequency has got a future. I really do. The chips in theory are cheaper. In theory, Amazon are using them, hospitals are using them. There isn't a lot of people using them in our work environment. I'd like to see 10 years worth of using them, to make sure they will last in a tag. I know that some of the chips and some of the tags we've got now in the sheep industry, if they're put in wrong, the chips don't last in them.
Yeah.
I know we need some time. We need something to get it right. And it's great that Scotland want to get on and do it, but also, do you Scottish farms want one reader for the sheep and one for the cattle?
Almost definitely not.
No. And at the moment, if we're going to be the only country or Scotland's going to be the only country that wants a dual reader, who's going to pay for it? True Test, Gallagher, Shearwell, they spread the cost of these readers out across a global market. There is a high frequency in cattle tags in Canada, but they're off the market. Last time I looked, they've been took off the market.
Yeah, it does seem like it's I mean, in my last 10 minutes of hearing it experience, sounds like it's going to be where we're going to be, but we need a bit more research and development get into it. Yeah.
We need a lot more research and development. Some of the advantage of it, it's got a pocket, it's got an extra storage capacity on it, so we can store extra information on it. So at the moment on EID tags, we just have a tag number. There is no reason on a high frequency, because it's got 3 pockets, that we can store other information, which again sounds absolutely brilliant. But can we make it secure? Can we make it secure? And that's the big ask, and it's a big ask in the meetings I've had, because if we're taking BVD or something like that as a status, or TB, or whatever you want to put it, and we want to put that onto the tag, so when somebody scans it in market or something, they can get its history. That information's got to come from a government database. That's got to go into a third-party software, then go into an EID reader to be uploaded. Because that status can change in its life. It's not like that animal's been born and everything's good. That status might change. So that has got to be able to be imprinted, but also kept secure. And again, I don't disbelieve it's not possible. But we've only got some of the software companies connecting with the government gateways in the last 3 years for movements.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I think, yeah, interesting one. I'm sure it'll be here. If we're having this chat in 20 years' time, it sounds like we'll be talking about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it is a technology for the future. I don't want to dispute it, but all I'm a little bit wary of, I think we just need a lot more time before somebody goes into it. And the other issue I've got is we need the whole of the UK to go into it. If we're going to go high frequency in cattle, we want the whole thing, because there's enough cattle across the border into Scotland, into England. And again, this relates to one of your questions you sent me. If we end up going for dual frequency tags that can have both in the technology in the tag, which again isn't a problem, weight becomes an issue. Now, the biggest reason for losing tags is one, incorrect application. But the second thing they've discovered in trial work globally is if we increase the weight of them past what they were designed for, they have a breaking point. And again, if we put 2 technologies in, high frequency is reasonably light technology, but if we put a decent thing in the back of it to take low frequency, we're increasing the weight, we're increasing the tolerances we have to have these tags breaking at, so they don't rip out their ears as badly.
Matt, we mentioned the various companies that are in this world: Shearwell, True Test, Tapari, Gallagher, whoever. It doesn't matter. I don't need to name them all. Do all of these have strengths and weaknesses, or are they all a very similar product?
They all have strengths and weaknesses. Each manufacturer's got massive strengths, but it depends what each farmer's trying to get out of it. Simple things. Some devices connect better with iPhones. Some can, most of them connect with Android, no problem at all. Some devices connect better with iPhones. And it depends what you're trying to join to them as well. So if we're looking at auto dosing guns, what people are all fashionable at the moment, want these dosing guns that change the dose rate between every single animal. Great, this, that, and the other. But remember, some of these devices have only got 1 Bluetooth connection or 2 Bluetooth connections. And if you're trying to send it to your third-party software as well, and an EID reader's trying to send in as well, you've used your 2 connections. And that's the biggest thing I'm coming across at the moment is, we're, as an industry, we're moving on really, really quickly for the hardware manufacturers to keep up with us.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. If someone's listening to this, Matt, and they're maybe thinking, oh, I maybe want to get better at this, and whatever that might involve. What does that involve? What should people be considering? What should be thinking about?
Depends which avenue. If we're looking at data-wise, is sit down and work out what data you need to capture. Ask yourself, what I do with a client before I start is we basically get the health plan out. Go through the health plan, work out what data points. There's always points in a health plan where they're always doing something. So, calving's an easy one for cattle, sheep, sheep and cattle weaning, this, that, and the other. And What targets do you want? How many calves do you want alive? How many lambs do you want alive? And what weight you want of them? That's a great starting point. Body condition scoring sheep's another big driver, this, that, and you'll work out what points are. And a lot of the time you start talking to farmers about things they want to capture. And you go, that's absolutely great. But that's linked to that. So if we take something, for example, I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. Like giving a lamb some colostrum or something silly like that. Is that something we're really worried about? Yes, it's caused us a bit of work, but do we need to record it? Do we need to record every sheep? No, one of my clients only recording problems to the sheep they bring into the barn. So they're lambing outdoors, they're nearly finished now. So they got nearly 2,000 ewes. They are only recording the problems that are coming in. So when I was on farm last week, there was 70 ewes they got problems to. Do we have to scan every single lamb to ewe? No, not in the sheep industry, if we don't want to. But for them, what the critical is, any of those ewes that have had problems, is that affecting their weaning weight of their lambs? Is that affecting their lifetime performance of their lambs? Are they doing it next year? If they are, let's get rid of them. So it's working out what's right and wrong for you. For the cattle industry, a lot of the time it's, recording the births, the information, calving eve, bits and pieces. But for most cattle people, it's having a good connection to the government gateways. So they can do it on their phone, their tablet, whatever, and don't have to go back home and connect into the government gateways to upload calving data. So it's working out what software, what hardware works best for the farm, and then tags come into it afterwards. What tags you got, what technology you got, and that thing. But 9 times out of 10, we stick with the same tags the farm's got. Just it's spending time with them, hand-holding them to put the tags in properly, explain how they go in, how they'll stay in. If you feel your ear, the bottom of your ear is fatty and soft, and the top of your ear's cartilage is hard. So if you're going to want something to stay in your ear, it'll more likely stay in the top better because it's got a stronger cartilage in it. We don't want to break the cartilage in a cow's ear or a sheep's ear because you can see the veins putting through, but putting it in the right place between them, in the middle, closer to the head, so it's not on the tip where it's softer, it will stay in better. Now, if you like metal tags, there is metal EID tags around, metal loops, put them in. Put them forward facing. Most people in cattle put the loops forward facing, but in the sheep they put them under the bottom of their ear. It's like, okay, well, it's easier in a cow, yeah, but most of the loop tags in sheep are designed to go in from the front, just like you would do a cow, and they have a higher retention rate if you do that. But most people haven't read the instructions.
Yeah, because you've done it your whole life and you just assume it's
Dad's done it. Dad's done it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've in my various lives in lecturing and podcasts and whatever, one of the biggest things I dislike the most is mum and dad do that. That's fine. You're going to learn a lot from your parents, but it doesn't mean it's the only thing that matters.
No.
There's so much more to it, and I'm not surprised what you're saying is the case. And here, I'll hold my hand up. I'm probably one of them. I've seen it happen since I was a kid, and okay, that's how I do it, and I've never looked into it again.
No, but again, going back to, I got a client not that far up the road from me. They've only got a few cattle, 50 maximum. And we had a massive loss rate in cattle in their tags. So I record every tag that's lost on their farm when I'm there, and every quarter how many tags were lost. And we discovered that we'd had a batch of tags that were built wrong, that they were breaking. But who sends the tags back to the manufacturer so they've got a problem?
Yeah, you're right.
You just curse at them, go to market, say they're a load of rubbish, won't buy those again. Nobody sends them back. If the chips don't read, if the tags are falling out, snapping in the middle, if you've got a dual flag tag and they're snapping in the middle, they're designed to snap, don't get me wrong. But if you've got both parts, send them back. And if you've got a high percentage of them that you can return them, because the manufacturers will want to know why they're breaking, because they don't want a reputation of their tags being rubbish.
Exactly. And if they're receptive to that and they're like, oh, we'll send you the new batch and we'll look into why this is, then you're probably not going to go to the market and say, I'll never buy them again. Well, you might, but you might actually buy them again.
I've got to say that there's also, which nobody knows, which again I didn't know until I was doing my Nuffield, is that there's a government gateway that you can report tag losses to,
Oh,
and
is there?
the government will strip them of their license if there is too many complaints, because
Oh, there you
every
are.
tag is licensed to be used, and if they have a problem, they are removed off the market. That's why Australia and New Zealand have less tags on the market than we do in the UK.
There you are. Here, learn. Well, I was going to say learn something new every day, as if I haven't learned anything so far. I continue to learn, but um, we're obviously here on the Monitor Farm podcast, Matt. Tell us about sort of what role you guys have had, or yourself have had, with the Monitor Farm, and what sort of projects you've been working on.
So I got invited up to one of the monitor farms. They wanted to monitor the cattle better. So we've looked at putting EID in. So I sat down with them first, like we're doing now, over a video link, and I do this with a lot of people, and we have a half an hour, 45 minute, could be an hour and a half call with them, work out, go through a lot of understanding their farm as much as can, how many animals you got, what do you want to record, where your problems are, this, that, and the other. Then I try and put a tailored package together for what I believe is right for them: software, hardware, EID readers, bits and pieces. So on the farm, we were lucky. I went to some of the manufacturers, and the manufacturers gave us a load of tags to try, because the farmer wasn't sure which tags he would like. So we got forget how many, I think it's 50 or 4 different companies. We've put those in, and we're going to monitor them through the year to see which ones he's happy with, which ones he gets the better read with, which ones he prefers, losses, bits and pieces. As well as that, we installed a True Test XR5000 there. Reason I went for an XR5000, a few of the bits he would like to record, we can record in his software, but it's very difficult sometimes to see it in real time as animals are coming through a crush. So on the XR5000, we also can do it on the Gallaghers and some of the Gallagher range. We can build custom headings which come up and say this animal's in a withdrawal period, that animal's not meeting its daily live weight gain, and stop comes up on the screen to tell you need to investigate more. It might be lame, it could be anything you're looking for, but we can add more protocols into it. So we decided that was the right model for that farm. Other farms I'm using different models and different manufacturers. Then we came up and set it all up. So he already had the load bars in place, so that was one big thing saving. It was already on True Test. But what the other thing people don't realise is that True Test stuff will work with Gallagher load bars, it worked with Shearwell load bars, it worked with Livestock load bars. They're all the same. You just need to tell it what it's got underneath it. So, we went there, set it all up, set the software up. We tagged a load of cattle, went through with him, tagging cattle, showing him how to do it, how to weigh, how the weighers work, the different settings on the device. So, do we want more accuracy? Do we want, accuracy is probably the wrong word, but, there's kind of different settings on them. One for speed, which gets you within like half a kilo. But if we're not worried too much, if we're looking, lambs is easier to work in sometimes than cattle, because lamb's got to be 40 kilos. If it's 38, just get rid of it. We don't want it. It's too light. But if it's 40 kilos or 39 and a half, just take a bit longer to work out, is it actually 40 or not? So setting a few of those things up, how to record the tags, different manufacturers, how to set up the software, the hardware, installing stuff, getting it all set up so it worked right. So that's what we've done. The farmers are happy. Must be really happy, because I've not heard a lot from him. So that's a really good sign that things are right, because I soon get some phone calls when things are not going right. Instead of putting panel readers on because of his setup and how things were working, which would have been nice, so it all went hands free, we've put a stick reader in place. And I don't know if you ever did it, but I've seen them, especially in the southern hemisphere, they tie them up to the rafters or the end of the crush on a bit of inner tube, so they can spring out the way. So you just pull it down, scan the tag, you can the information set straight to the weigh head, and all he has to do is keep opening and shutting the crush unless stop or something comes up on the screen telling him that there's a problem. So that's all done, and we're still waiting to see what happens and what he's thinking. So he's busy carving at the moment. So that's all positive.
And the very nature of this podcast, Matt, the whole way has been the openness of the Monitor Farm just for that. This is Robert Wilson at Cowbog, isn't it? Have I got the right
Yeah,
Monitor Farm?
yeah.
Yeah, so the Roxburgh farm. Um, yeah, we covered sort of some of what was happening there. Yeah. Do you have any, I don't want to say preconceived ideas, but do you have something in your head that you feel might be the best of the four different 50 tags, or are you not sure at all?
Um, I've got two of them that spring out to me.
Okay.
And I'm interested to see what he thinks and what the farmer thinks. Farmers like the metal cattle tags, and Shearwell do one with a microchip inside it. And I've not done enough work with them to see how well they read, but the retention of them tags farmers like. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get on. Personally, I prefer the buttons for cattle for the EID. I think they hide better, they read better. I don't need to see the darn tag. I'm not looking at reading the number off it. One of the biggest problems with cattle tags, which will be solved as soon as we get compulsory EID, is that their chip number is different to the printed number. Where in sheep they two match up with. It's what you see is what you get. What WYSIWYG. As soon as that comes in cattle, I just wish the governments would bring it in now. I know there's a slight issue with cattle numbers have got a 6-digit individual number, and sheep have got a 5. That's the one of the stumbling blocks with it all. But in my head, there is simple farmer solutions to deal with it. We just need government to agree to simple farmer solutions. But there is options. There is actually enough numbers in the tag string, just that we have a 0 at the front. So we have 826, which is the UK number for the sheep industry. And something people don't realise is that's a postal number for a global post. No, Afghanistan, which is the only other one I can remember, is 009 for some reason. But every country's got one. The postal industry use it, as is 826. Then we have a 0, which they class as a check number. And nobody really can explain to me why we need a 0 there. So can we put something else there for the historic herd?
Well, if
That's
I was just going to say, if that zero doesn't differ for anything, as it doesn't, yeah, I'm totally with you. The 826, yeah, fair enough, UK compared to whatever, but yeah, I'm totally with you.
I'm going to say, and other countries have it in different places or don't have it at all.
Yeah.
So in some countries, it's used for the difference between sheep and cattle. So they have a 1 there, a 0 there, for different species. So there's got to be a solution. We just need some normal people to actually agree and get things sorted. But I do personally. I like the round discs. The buttons. I do believe they read well. Biggest problem again is farmers don't know how to put them in. That's why a lot of farmers don't like them and lose them. But you go and look at where the tags have been put in. 9 times out of 10, they're in the wrong place.
You've mentioned that a couple of times, Matt, and obviously one of the biggest challenges, as farmers, we say whatever, these tags aren't staying in. There's issues, you're getting caught in fences, whatever. But as you're saying, the biggest challenge is actually how they're being applied. What what is there other tips for increasing tag retention, or is it just apply it correctly? Is that
Uh,
pretty much the primary?
yeah, apply it correctly, apply it in the right place, understand where it's got to be put in. Tags put in at a young age will stay in. When I was managing a sheep flock, I had tags I put in at birth, which were big. They were I don't know how to describe them. They were the Avons, I think they call them, of all flex. So they had a big round button and a triangle flag at the front, reasonable size, nearly as big as the lamb's ear when they were put at birth. But I went to a farm. I went and helped them lamb in the first year I was out working for myself, and one of those ewes was 7 years old, and their tags that she had put in at birth were still in.
Right.
They're big tags you put in at birth, never a problem. In the sheep industry, one of the other problems is hygiene. We're not very hygienic, especially around lambing time. People are not. I wouldn't say you got to keep everything sterile, but just a bit of sense that we don't need tags floating around in the pickup or in the footwell or in a bringing up box or getting covered in rubbish and this, that, and the other. There is a higher risk of infection. So dunking them in some iodine, Savlon. I can't think what the new iodine version stuff is, but I can't think what it's called. Top of my head. No backs. That's it.
No
No
backs.
back.
Yep.
Yeah, something like that, just to clean them, make sure they're clean when you put them in, will help ear infections, bits and pieces. But personally, for all my career, I've never done that. I've just took one strip out of a packet, and I've only ever had a joint heel problem once in the sheep, and that was because they were prototype tags that were designed wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
So my joint heel was within tolerances, within the percent we were expecting every year.
I think it's one thing my parents take pretty seriously. I mean, when I talk about farm experience, it's very much just working at mum and dad's farm, and I do all the other stuff. But I've never tagged something not straight out of a bag.
But
it's just
you'd be surprised how many farms you go on to, and they've got a plastic, like a vet tub. A vet walks around with tags laying around in it. The cow's carved into it, this, that, and the other. They've tipped the liquid out, and then they wonder why they've got scabby ears or something's gone wrong. You kind of go there. Would you put that through your ear? If you have your ears pierced, would you look at what they do to try and keep the area sterile to a certain degree?
sounds like the tag's already been through a wet adoption before. So
Basically, yeah. It does amaze me, but I've tagged in muddy fields, bits and pieces, and never saw a major effect. But again, it's just the risk is there, but we got to mitigate the risk. And again, putting it in the right place so it doesn't rip out. Because once you get that tag ripped out, which it must be very painful for the animal, you've got a hard task in finding somewhere where you can keep that secure inside, because you've damaged and scarred the tissue.
it leads us on to a really important point about all of this. We've all seen, whether it's down to incorrect application after this. I'm guessing the answer is probably yes, or just or unlucky, which I'm sure it also is at times as well. We've seen the torn ears, we've seen whatever. What are the sort of the welfare concerns with tagging, and how do we do everything we can? And I know what the main answer is going to be. It's going to be applying right, tagging right. But what are we doing to mitigate any potential welfare issues?
One's tagging right, making sure they're clean, because that the biggest risk is that first application, putting them in. Again, look at your tags. Sheep industry, some tags are designed just to go in the ear, to go on the lorry. They're not designed to be in there forever. The manufacturers might say it is, but there's a reason they've designed them like that. And I wouldn't say the most expensive tags are the better tags neither. But if that tag does get ripped out, that makes life very difficult. Then a lot of the time, I will probably recommend that they put a different tag in that ear, a different type of tag, because we've got to look at, especially in cattle, this could have a big rip in it. What can we get in there the most sensibly to make sure it's not ripped out? Now, I was on a farm just out of Scotland, and they were saying they were having a bad problem with tags being ripped out. And what we just found out is that they were grazing too low, so that the stock were putting their head through the fences and pulling them back and ripping them out. Now, so the first thing you got to do once you understand that is make sure they've got some feed in front of them so they're not ripping them out. It might sound obvious, but if things are getting tight, make sure they've got bales in with them, this, that, and the other, so they're not trying to put heads over fields. That's perfect, great management. It might sound absolutely stupid, but if there is a high loss rate, if the tags are being put in right and the manufacturers can't find anything wrong, there is another management issue that's causing the problem. Let's discover what that management issue is.
You're having the right amount, having that access to what they require in front of them. You say is too simple, but simple doesn't mean stupid. It is absolutely correct. Yeah, it probably one I hadn't really considered. It makes so much sense now it's been said, but yeah, obviously,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. It, you've worked in this for a while, Matt. Probably longer than 99% of people. Um, you'll have learnt lessons over the last, what's that, 22 years since you first used it, I think you said.
Yeah,
What,
scary when you say it like that. So
2.2
yeah.
decades. What's the what's the biggest learning points? And I'm sure you've covered a lot of them already, but what's the biggest things that you're saying to people on how to absolutely do what they're doing right to the best of their ability for the animal, for them, for their business? What are the real learning points that really jump out aside the things you've already said?
So again, going back to when I start with somebody, I ask them to choose. If we're looking at collecting data, I ask them to select 3 things they want to monitor over the season. So don't try and record everything because it doesn't work. It really doesn't. We can record everything, and I mean, I've recorded some really funny things. You can record a lot. Choose 3 things that interest you, and I guarantee you'll do 2 of them well. But you will learn how to use the equipment doing that. You will learn what's going wrong, then we'll home things out. So start with working out what data you want to collect. Go through your flock plan, your herd plan. A lot of time this can do with vets. What is the problems? Then we'll work out what data we need to collect around it, what equipment we need, bits and pieces to make all that possible. Monitor them 3 things as well as you can. What farmers don't do is they don't sit down and interrogate that data at any point. So make sure at some point in that plan, I always get it put in the health plan as well, that data is going to be scrutinised in that month. We're going to sit down. Zoom's brilliant for it, Teams, whatever you want to use, and sit down and just go through it. And the big advantage these days of the cloud-based apps is that I can access it from here. You're in Scotland. As long as I've got access to your database, I can do all the interrogation for you. We can have a quick Zoom meeting, so hour and a half, we can be done and dusted. You can be away, and you've got an idea of, have I met my target? So if we take sheep, because there's a lot more changes in the sheep industry against the cattle, if your weaning weights are not where you need them to be, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
So, what are we going to do about it? Some farmers will say, well, it doesn't matter, I'll get more money at the end of the season. Start working out how much that feed's costing you. I know grass grows for free in theory, but it doesn't.
And it's getting dearer and dearer with every year to grow grass. Yeah, for
It
sure.
is. It is. Work out, the best year I had when I managed a farm was selling lambs to stores. 70% of lambs to stores, got rid of them. Got rid of them into the first source sale.
I think you need a very good finishing ability on your farm to make it worthwhile to take that jump.
And that's again coming back to my Nuffield, which I found very interesting, is the concept of us having somebody who can do that job really well and sending the lambs to them or the calves to them, and having a share agreement in finishing the animals, because you know who yours are. They can muddle through. I know disease risks, bits and pieces are higher in this country against others. But with that electronic tag, I can monitor how well and see how well them animals are growing. I could send a load of stock up to you, cattle, calves, as long as you weigh them monthly, 6 weekly, I can see how well they're doing. We can then split the profits or whatever. I found that a very interesting concept, which we don't really look at in the UK. But again, going back to how we can use information and bits and pieces, you need to set up what you're doing correctly. It's great. Grants are my biggest bugbear, have been before I started doing what I like. Farmers love them, and I understand why we love them. We get a bit of money to help us buy something. We always fill the forms in the last minute for some reason, because we're always busy. We're quite good at that. Sugar that needs to be in by midnight, let's get it done. But nobody spends the time working out, is that equipment right? Will it do what I want it to do? So that goes back to building that health plan, parting with that data capture plan, bits and pieces. Then, again, once we've got all that in place, we're looking at when are we going to tag the animals. Cattle, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straight after birth. Sheep, do we need to tag them at birth? 90% of the industry don't. But as long as we do it at their first handling point or by weaning, we can get some really good data to help most farms out.
Yeah, No, I like your point about that almost continuous interrogation of what you're doing, because it's so simple to look at technology as, well, I've got it, we're sorted. It's just not the case, and nothing ever will be the case as far as I'm aware. You've got to make sure, well, I've got this thing, whatever that might be. It could be a true test or an iPhone. It doesn't matter. What can I now do to make sure this increases and optimizes my efficiency as we go?
And it's just simple. Batch of the cattle coming in. You know, if you're buying them in, you know, which ones are performing better for you. And we interrogated some data on a farm, and we actually got a shock of how well the different breeds and the bit different things were doing. They were coming from a farm in Scotland, coming down, and we thought something was massively going to stand out, and this, that, and the other. And actually looking through it, what stood out was what happened to them earlier in life. You know, not actually once we got them onto that farm. Actually, we could manage that quite nicely because we'd done a lot of work over the last few years. But it's what happened to them before. So what we've now got access to their database and say we're not having those, but we'll pay a bit extra for these ones because we know they're going to hit our targets.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I, as I tend to draw these to a close, Matt, I like to sort of look to what's next and sort of talk to some tips there, what you give people. But we mentioned earlier about the likes of high frequency down the line and whatnot. If we had this chat on the 30th of April 2035, I'm sure my beard will be knocking on grey by that stage, but what do you think this environment looks like? Do we have is cattle a necessity now? Are we in the high frequency world or not quite?
I believe we'll be in the high frequency world. I believe we'll have more walkover weighers working better. I believe that the collars, you know, in cattle wise, the electronic fencing collars will be a lot better than what they are. We'll have a lot more remote monitoring. And one of the big things I can see as being able to do in the future, we're kind of there now, but not, is put an EID reader into the end of your USB or your on your phone. You know, a sleeve on your phone or something. We're halfway there, but we're not there yet. And it's all down to supply and demand. We're not a big enough market for these tech companies.
Yeah, it almost needs to be a technology that's developed elsewhere that then comes in.
Or if we look at all the technology we're using now, except for Shearwell, most of it comes out of the Southern Hemisphere. You know, Gallagher, True Test are all Southern Hemisphere companies. Taparia are all Southern Hemisphere companies. Software's different, but we've got more software companies than most countries have got by a thing. And I think that cloudies the water quite a lot because they're all competing for such a small market in the UK. You know, it really does muddy the water. They're all, I won't say, they're all trying to stand out. But, you know, if you look at, again, some of the other countries, they've only got 3 or 4, which they spend a lot more on development. Instead of trying to do it for a whole world, they're developing it for their country and what their country needs.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if anyone's listening, and we did a talk that with Anne Eleanor Osen and Tony Waterhouse about monal collars, which is monal collars. I think I'm saying
Yeah.
that wrong. Um, which has been implemented through the monitor farm system as well. Quite a few of the folks with cattle have jumped on board with that. So if you want to go listen to that one, I think that was 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. You can go and check that one out. Um, but
Uh,
sorry, on you
uh,
go.
I got to say, I think that all that sort of stuff will just get better and better as we go along. Look at what technologies in your iWatch these days and your Galaxy watches. You know, them collars. There's no. I've looked at. I've got one here somewhere. I don't know where it is off the top of my head. Some tags that are from Norway, which have probably nearly got as much tech in them as what my watch has got in them. They can send alerts out if the animal's being chased. You know, they can do so much more. You know, the technology's there on the cusp of it. We've got to join on board, and we just need some of the countries like Norway's it's being developed in Norway because they get paid for animal attacks from bears and stuff like that. So they're developing it for that market. We can jump on board, which will help us with dog attacks and bits and pieces in the UK that we get alert to say these animals are under pressure of some description. You know, there is loads of stuff coming along. We're just in the infancy stage of understanding it.
I'm a big fan of the concept of rumen monitoring boluses in their infancy, but I think there's the impact of pH on the rumen and temperature seems to be able to showcase just about everything from estrus to stress, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it'll all come out. It can be, a lot of this can be built into tags. We can heat detect, we can do all sorts of things. That technology, ruminant boluses are absolutely great. They're just too expensive.
Yep.
For with EID in it, so we can put boluses in animals which have got EID in them. Not an issue. Great, work really, really well. The Scrapey program used to use those instead of using tags because they didn't get lost. They're they just cost more. That's the
Yeah.
issue.
But like everything, I mean, Tesla's cost a ridiculous amount 5 years ago. They're now becoming affordable. It's just the way it happens. Yeah, just the way it goes. But here, Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really learned a lot with that. I really did. That was fascinating. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you for inviting me.
No, it's been a joy, and for those of you listening, that's been Matthew Blyth speaking all things tags, making sure they stay in and how they operate as well. I certainly learnt a lot from the low frequency in particular, and then also by extension high frequency and the differences in how they operate. And if there's any questions, I'm sure well, I'll quickly ask, but I'm sure Matt would be happy to answer them if you send them in to us. Yep.
That's no problem at all. I gotta say, we need to share knowledge. That's the big thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. So get in touch with us at the Monitor Farm Programme through Grace or whoever, or myself, and we can pass them on. So today has been Matthew Blyth on tags, and as ever, thank you very much for listening, and we shall see you for the next one. See you then.
Thanks for tuning in to the Monitor Farm Scotland podcast. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you get your podcast from for more episodes as we continue to dive into the stories from our Monitor farms. If you want to stay updated with our latest news and events, please visit the Monitor Farm Scotland website and follow us on social media for more updates and keep in the know about what our farms are getting up to. Monitor Farm Scotland is funded by Scottish Government and managed by Quality Meat Scotland and AHDB.